Are you a real estate professional navigating the bustling landscape of New York City, or simply someone fascinated by its ever-evolving skyline? Either way, you're in the right place. Welcome to another episode of the Big Apple's Core, where we break down the complex world of corporate and commercial real estate. Join us as we explore the latest trends, challenges, designs, and opportunities that are shaping New York City. Today's episode is brought to you by CoreNet NYC's learning sponsor, the Rockefeller Group. Rockefeller Group, a love for people, a love for the city.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Big Apple's Core podcast, your one-stop shop for all things commercial real estate in New York City. For this episode, I will be your host. My name is Allison Eagle, and I am with Turner & Townsend. Today, we have the fantastic Larry Charlip with Warner Music Group and Michael Beckerman with CRETech.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be with the two of you today.
Today, we're going to be talking about some proptech trends and talk a little bit about the upcoming event that is happening in New York City. Michael, would you like to explain what the event is, when it is, and all
Absolutely.
that jazz?
Well, first, I've got to obviously acknowledge CoreNet and the wonderful support that the organization gives to CRETech for many years now. And it's a very, very important relationship to not just CRETech, but our industry, right? And you said, and we were laughing prior, Allie, about proptech and what the proper terminology is. It's just the built environment for me. And so while, give a short plug for CRETech, what I really want to talk about is Larry's perspective, your perspective on just the built environment and specifically office and the future of office, the future of work and all things like that. And that's really, really core to our audience. So what CRETech is, we've built perhaps the largest community of innovation tech professionals in the built environment, mostly around office space. So these would be a couple different categories: office, landlords, office brokerage firms, private equity, REITs, and what have you. So the folks that are owning and operating the spaces. Increasingly, we want to attract more of the occupiers of these spaces. And we've got a lot of the technology startups and a lot of the venture world that's supporting these startups. And we convene twice a year at a big trade show in New York, coming up November 13th and 14th at the Javits Center, and then we do another event every year in London. And it's all just about driving innovation and improving the functionality of the office experience.
Very cool. Larry, thanks for being our customer insight today as you represent the audience of the Big Apple's Core podcast and CoreNet as a whole. We're excited to dive into all the fun things we're going to, hear more about at the event. When is the event again?
November 13th and 14th at the Javits Center.
Fantastic. Thank you. Alrighty, well, let's get into it.
Absolutely.
Larry, do you just want to give a brief description of what kind of occupier you are right now and how your role kind of ties into proptech in general?
Sure. So I'm Vice President of Facilities Management for Warner Music Group, and I also am the chair of the New York chapter of CoreNet. So I get to network with some of the largest end user occupiers in New York and the tri-state area, and really globally, because New York is the hub of everything corporate. So we are a tenant in multiple buildings. We have 130 or so locations globally. So we're constantly looking at what are the right partnerships, whether it be with landlords, with built environment technology providers. How do we continue to increase the experience of our employees? We've gotten past the RTO conversation, but now that we're back in the office, well, what does that mean, and what do we need to occupy space fully? And it's not just physical attributes, furniture, et cetera. It's more and more technology based. And I'm really excited that CoreNet is partnering with CRETech, because I've been to a lot of conferences, and in the past, these conversations have happened in silos. They've happened with landlords, they've happened with developers, they've happened with the VC world, they've happened with furniture companies talking about technology. But more and more, the bridges are being built between those providers back to the end user, right? And we're not We're not looking to engage 8 different organizations in silos. We want to engage 8 different organizations, 8 different industries and categories as one cohesive unit so that it all works together. And that's why when we come to conferences like CRETech, to have all of those in one place is a great experience for us.
If I could just sort of double click on that, Allie, for a sec.
Absolutely.
And this is why, I'm such a fan of the Big Apple's Core podcast, and CoreNet is so important to us. As I said, if we just take it out of CRETech and we just talk about our community and our industry, we've built this 150,000 follower community at CRETech globally. And what's been missing from the conversation to date, since we've been doing this for 7 or 8 years, is this guy and his the occupier. And I've been in the real estate industry my whole really long career, and with all due respect to the office market, the occupier wasn't that you were an afterthought. I didn't mean to say disrespectfully. It was like, all right, well, we're gonna get them in the building. But it's theirs, right? We're gonna provide the core and shell. It's yours. We'll see you in 7, 10 years. We hope it's a good experience that you'll come back and renew. And today, whether it's because of COVID or just the changes in the workforce, whether it's through technology, increasingly we need them at the table to be part of the conversation and part of this community, so that my ecosystem can understand what he wants and that they will build it and they will invest in it. But without hearing their voice, it's kind of, we're just talking to ourselves, and that's why this is so important to be part of this conversation today.
And to that point, for a long time, that's the way it operated, right? You had the landlords provided space, the end user, the occupiers leased the space, and we did what we wanted with it. And it was a relationship that came together for a couple of months while you negotiated, and then you separated for 7 to 10 years, and then you came back together. That's not the case anymore. Today, the occupier needs the landlord to provide certain things to get us in the building. It's the reason why we're talking about things like B and C buildings being converted to residential, and occupiers are looking at A and trophy buildings alone, right? Because we need the things that go into those buildings, and it leads with technology. On the other side of that, internally, real estate, facilities, et cetera, we always sat in the background, right? The IT and the tech teams were up front. People teams, HR were up front. We sat in the background. What has changed through COVID is now we're at the forefront, right? Now they want to know, what are we doing to create an experience for our employees? When you take a look at what landlords are doing to build ecosystems, just here in New York alone, right? If you look at what Related has done in Hudson Yards and what Vornado has done at Penn,
amazing.
They've built these ecosystems in an urban area that you don't generally have. And, what would normally be a campus environment in a suburban area. And they're doing that by being forward-thinking from a sustainability perspective. They're being forward-thinking from an amenity perspective. And how do they tie that all together? They tie it together with technology. And that matters to us, the occupiers, because it helps us with our ESG programs. And, we start to tie it all together, but we can't do it without the landlord. I mean, mid-size and smaller occupiers certainly can't do it without, maybe the big boys can, right? They're building their own, right? They build it from within. But a Warner Music Group isn't going out there and developing our own app to tie all of these together. They're not building the systems to track our sustainability data. Right. We need to partner with the landlord to do that, particularly when we're in buildings where we're not paying our own utilities. The landlord is, right? So how do we get access to that data? How do we make our space frictionless, right? From the time they walk in the door, but we're only a tenant 5 floors in a 40-floor building, right? But we want it to be frictionless, and we want it to be the same technology. But I also have an employee that goes and travels to LA, and that's a different landlord. And how do we make it frictionless there and bring it all together? Technology ties it together. So the more we can bring those ecosystems, those silos together in one, it's more beneficial to the end user.
And it's, in terms of, I'm sorry, I'm asking too many questions,
No,
but I'm
please,
like
go
a
ahead.
sponge here. Because
what we're here for.
I got him. I don't want to let him go without asking a couple questions. Isn't your focus at Warner Music and in your real estate hat that you wear, Larry, isn't it also now increasingly about your employees? Not to say that it never was, but don't you also like think a lot about the health, wellness, safety,
100%.
experience, collaboration of those people that are working for? I mean, how many employees does Warner have?
7,500 roughly.
And isn't now the focus? So it's like we talk about the landlord and the service providers, then we talk about, right, you, the head of real estate, making these decisions, but you're really thinking about those people that are making Warner what it is in terms of one of the most iconic brands, companies in the world in terms of music.
Exactly. And what you're seeing more and more, so for us, the way we're structured, we fall under the umbrella of workplace experience. And under workplace experience is facilities, project delivery, real estate transactions, hospitality, and for us, we have studio operations. That all falls under workplace experience. So it's, and I've been saying this isn't just to Warner Music, but I've been saying for a while, one of the questions we need to ask is, when does the employee experience start, right? So to me, the employee experience starts the moment we leave our door.
Right.
In the morning.
Yes.
The moment we
exactly.
leave home till the time we get back home. It used to be, you show up to the office, you sit in a cubicle, it's got a 5-foot high panel, 7x7, 6x6, whatever it is, and you work there. Now we have to provide a space where we have to think about how does the employee get to the office? What's the toll on our employee when they, to get to the office and to get home? What does that do to them personally?
Yeah.
From a wellness perspective, a mental wellness perspective, et cetera? What are we providing in the office when they get there? And more than just a barista and free lunch, what are we providing? Do we have wellness rooms? What do those wellness rooms have in them? How do they work when they're in the office? Do they need heads down work? We have heads down space. Do they need collaboration space? We need collaboration space. Do they need space to meet in conference rooms? And how do they walk into that conference room and the room knows who they are and why they're there?
Yes.
Right? And how do we tie that all together so that, it's not 8 steps to get onto a Zoom call or a Google Meet call or a Teams call or whatever, or maybe multiple at the same time, right? How do you make that as frictionless as possible?
Are you hired? I have really good musical selection, taste. I really do. Despite what my wife and kids say, I think I know music pretty well. Are you hired? We'll talk after.
We might be.
Okay, Alex, sorry.
It's okay. Larry, now, in your experience, what do you think is working well in technology, and what landlords are providing, what you have available to you as an occupier? And you said you are ideally looking for one-stop shops, but what do you think is?
Great question.
Yeah.
We all want to know.
It's a tough question to answer, and I think, and I don't want this to sound like a non-answer, but I don't think anything's hitting the nail on the head just yet, but we're getting there. But I don't think we'll ever get there, if this makes sense, because it's similar to when I talk about goal setting, right? You should never reach your goal. As you get closer, you should move the goal line, right? The same thing. We should never quite get there because things are going to change constantly, right? What's needed today, what works today is going to change in 2, 3, 4, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, right? I mean, just look at how quickly anything Google related, any technology Google related is updated and changed, right? We keep adding to it. So we don't know what we need tomorrow. And it's a tough challenge for us, right? So we have to, we look to future proof, but we don't know what the future is. So what's working well? The landlords are getting more and more involved in building tenant experience apps, smart building technology, bringing in smart building technology. Those are working well. We take advantage of those. The challenge we have, going back to what I said before, where we have 130 plus offices in, I don't know, 70 countries. I couldn't tell you how many different landlords we're dealing with. Some are very sophisticated landlords. Some are mom and pop own a building. Well, how do we tie those technologies together so that they're cohesive? Right now, we're, sure, if you're talking on the sustainability side, you can partner with a Schneider Electric or a Watershed, et cetera, that could pull data in, but it's only as good as the information you're getting. How do we continue to improve upon that so that we're not working in 20 different systems to pull data into one?
I see.
Right, on a manual basis, because anytime you're doing it manually, the margin for error goes up.
And that, Ali, is a problem throughout our ecosystem, is the lack of connectivity between the technology companies, the startups, and the real estate owners, because every building is a snowflake, and that's what they'll tell you. So it's a hard problem to solve. I think we're working towards it, because what Larry wants is what the landlord wants, is they want fewer solutions, bigger, more seamless, more integrated, because it just makes it easier for them as well to integrate. And that's why you're seeing a lot on the startup side, a lot of integration is happening, which is a great thing, I think, ultimately. So that's a problem throughout the industry.
And I acknowledge we're creating an issue for the landlords when we
you
talk
are.
about this, because it used to be, again, the landlord just provided us with the space. We built everything within our space that we needed. Now we're going back to the landlord and saying, the only thing I want to build in my space is what I need for my employees to do their job. I want you to have everything else. I want you to have the fitness center. I want you to have the coffee shop. I want you to have someplace I can order for lunch. I mean, you go to Hudson Yards. If you're a tenant in Hudson Yards, you get an app. If you're having a meeting, you can order from 15 different coffee shops within Hudson Yards through an app. They deliver it to your space. You have coffee for your meeting. You don't have to have that in your space.
Wow.
You don't have to provide that in your space, right? So, and it's all integrated. It's all part of the tenant package.
So I guess this kind of leads into how are individual employees utilizing workplace experience apps, and what are they continue to look for?
Yeah, I think it depends on the tenant. I know for ourselves, we're looking for visitor management system. We're looking for ESG data. We're looking for what amenities are within the portfolio that our teams can access. Where we want to tie our seating reservation system into, if the landlord has an app, into their app, or how do we build that alongside and tie it together so that when our employees are coming into the office, they only have to go to one app to do it. They don't have to register in one app as a visitor, register the visitors in one app, register to assign a desk for themselves for the day in another app, book a conference room in another app, check their email in another app, how do we tie that together so that they have one portal to go through, even though there might be 30 different systems on the back
How
end
do
of
we
it?
make them
What's that
communicate?
middleware that's holding it all together?
And by the way, I think this is we're talking about the challenges. I think these are all wonderful things that are happening within the built environment, because what I've been able to see just over the last couple of years is that office spaces are just going to get better. Experiences are going to get better for people and cities. And you talk about these, connected spaces like at Hudson Yards, and this, like you go to Europe, and that's like foundational. They think much more about live, work, play, shop experiences. And, that conference that we do in London is like, it gives me a sense of where the U.S. is behind in some of these regards, particularly as it relates to ESG.
100%. And wellness.
And wellness. And, it just creates for better cities. They're more walkable. They're more, people are healthier. They're happier at work. So I think, while we're talking about a lot of challenges, it's all for good. And our tagline at CRETech has always been reimagining real estate. And you're seeing it. You're seeing spaces get better as a result of this dynamic and this conversation.
I mean, if you, in New York City alone, if you go back to the early 2000s, call it 2008 or so, when the bottom dropped out of the market, things were coming back, and landlords were fighting, and tenants were going to New Jersey. The landlords were fighting,
Don't know
right?
Jersey. Nothing wrong Jersey.
I lived in Jersey for 17
let's
years,
let's
but nothing beats New York.
keep it calm.
And they're coming back to New York. But the landlords at that time put a tremendous amount of investment into their buildings, to their Class A buildings. Where was those investments? They redid their lobbies. Right? Everybody thought if you redo your lobby and you put a lot of stone and marble and artwork and stuff like that, and they spent millions and millions and millions of dollars in it. We don't care about that. Yeah, we want a pretty lobby.
Yeah.
Now, and that was nice back then.
Yes.
I mean, I was in a building. Vornado spent $10 million redoing their lobby in 2010 or something like that. Now it's what amenity spaces are you building for us? Where, do you have a fitness center with a personal trainer, massage therapist, and doctor on site, right? How do we access it without having to pick up the phone and call the building office to do it? How do our employees take advantage of it? And that is, I'm not saying that's what's getting our employees into the office, but when they're there, they need that stuff, right? If we're asking them to leave their house to come to the office, which they proved during COVID they could do a lot of their work from home, then what do they need? How do we support them and their lifestyle
and their productivity, right?
Well, that's what makes them productive,
That's what I'm saying.
right?
Like, yeah.
And it's one thing to have these amenities. It's another thing, like the ease of access,
That's
being
right.
able to utilize them is really like what is the bulk of the conversation.
And then let's go to the back end of that, right? So
Yeah.
on the back end of that, our organizations are reporting in our sustainability reports that we're quote unquote providing these services. We might not be providing them ourselves, but through our landlords we could be, right? So how do we get the data to put into our ESG report? Because our clients, our investors, our suppliers all want to see that information, and in some countries we're required to report that, right? When you talk about particularly in Europe and CSRD and et cetera. So we're required, how do we get access to that data is just as important as what are the services we're providing.
And just on that note, Ali, and you notice Larry well, obviously, is that, if you follow somebody like Professor Joe Allen at Harvard, who spoke at last year's CRETech conference. And
phenomenal speaker.
And again, shame on me for always being such a late learner. Like, not really fully understanding how buildings can be detrimental to people's health. And that's what he's been just so incredibly enlightening about. So it's about getting the data, but it's also about investing in, air purification, air filtration, better quality air, which is what Professor Allen talks about, is so critical. That's technology. That's what's coming in. That's what we've been seeing in Europe for a while now. So
And
it's great that you bring it up.
buildings providing it is one thing, but it's occupiers being able to collect that data
And
and then
collect the data.
report it accurately
Yeah.
is, I'm sure, technology is at the core of that as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Let's talk about some fun stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not the Mets, though, right?
Oh, not today.
Sorry.
Not
I
today.
told Larry I wouldn't bring
Not
up
that
the
this
Mets.
isn't
but
all very fun, but let's talk about some fun trends that are happening in technology. Are there any trends that you're seeing come to light that are very popular right now? Are there any statistics kind of based around that, or what, whether occupier or landlords are really focusing on and new and exciting?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the obvious one is sustainability. I think that's what is dominating a lot of the conversations, is about, like, exactly what Larry said, which is we need to understand our carbon footprint, our carbon impact. We need to be able to measure it. And then we need to be able to solve it. So you mentioned our friends at Vornado. I mean, as forward-thinking as people think about Vornado with these beautiful, glass towers, and it's true. But what they don't really understand is their sustainability team, led by the great Lauren Moss, how much the emphasis they put in when they were rebuilding Penn on decarbonization, material, from the way the buildings are constructed to the materials that are used. So I think all the major landlords, and not just major, but I think all the forward-thinking landlords are really embracing decarbonization strategies from either their new builds, but a lot of the renovation work that's being done, and also from the fit-outs that they're doing as well. So for me, and that's something I'm very passionate about personally and spend a lot of time on professionally, is I think that's comes to my mind first and foremost as a major trend.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And from the occupier side, we want to continue to see that that trend moving forward because, again, once we sign the lease, we can tap into that data and use it as if it's ours, right? Because it's our space. So without us having to go through the expense of doing it ourselves, right? So so we want to know, how was the building built? What how much landfill diversion have there been? Can we get that? Again, I keep going back to data because more and more it's about how do we bring the data in. The data is the most important part on the back end of this all, is how do we continue to collect that data from it. So if the landlords are at the forefront, and the honest truth is, at the end of the day, the occupier is paying for it, right? Where it's the landlord isn't doing this for free. It's amortized in our rent, right? We're funding it, or they're funding it up front, and we're paying for it on the back end. So we can claim it as our own. It's the way the system works, and that's the trend that's working well. When you talk about what's working well, that's working well, right? The more forward-thinking landlords keep pushing the envelope, keep moving forward. We as occupiers will follow them because we don't have to do it on our own.
That's great. And I think the other thing, Allie, would be, obviously we can't get through a podcast or discussion without mentioning AI.
I know,
and I'm
that
not
was
an
good.
AI fanboy. I didn't mean it like that.
That was going to be my next question.
I'm sorry. But I just think
good.
in our world of technology, it's not that AI is a category. It's more that AI is a foundational tool that a lot of the tech companies are using just to get much, much better in terms of their ability to predict information and data in terms of how buildings are being operated efficiently, how energy is being consumed, the predictability of energy usage and things like that. And so I think AI's come into the built environment just like every other industry, and fundamentally given the startup community just like a 1000x component on their ability to deliver solutions that matter for whether it's the occupier or the landlord. So that's a big theme in terms of the tech sector, clearly.
And again, what the great thing about AI and going back to the data end of it is, as difficult as it is to get data, with AI, if you can get some data, AI can extrapolate that for you. Right? Without you having to figure that out on your own.
Yeah.
Which again, when you start doing that on as a manual process, it just leaves more room for error. So, if you could pull in pieces of data from different areas into an AI system, they can, we all, for our ESG data, we have some data. We don't have data for all buildings, so the data for the rest of the buildings, we assume, right? It's an educated guess. If we can pull benchmarking information and the pieces of information we do have on our portfolio, put that all into a system, and AI can spit out what those projections are, it makes our lives
And the more
easy.
we put in, the better it's going to get. So we're really only at its infancy right now.
Yep.
So it's a very exciting trend to follow, especially in the world of commercial real estate. All right. Well, thank you so much. For the sake of time, we're going to jump to our ending session, which we usually, we asked rapid fire fun facts about New York, and just waiting to hear your answers. So my first question is, what's your favorite place? Where's your favorite place to grab a drink in New York?
Well, I mean, for me, that's easy. It's any place that serves good tequila. As people that know me know, I'm pretty obsessed with good tequila. Not top shelf, just good, authentic, 100% agave. So I don't have a place, but
that's a great question, because there's a ton of great places. I'll tell you one of my favorite drinks in New York. I don't know if it's my favorite place to get a drink, but one of my favorite drinks in New York is, if you haven't had the VIP at Del Frisco's, you're missing out. It's vodka that's been marinating in pineapple, so it just tastes like pineapple juice.
That sounds
and it's
delish.
extremely dangerous drink to
the
have.
bar open now?
No,
I mean, I don't
it
drink
certainly
vodka,
is.
but
You don't have to. It just tastes like pineapple juice.
What's your favorite way to get around New York?
Oh, God, the worst question you could ask me, Ali, because I am so old and such a bridge and tunnel guy. I'm above ground. I mean, that's terrible. I'm either walking or cabbing or Ubering. Terrible. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. That's
Oh,
the
phew.
one. That's the one thing that COVID did to us was got us out of the train, and I try not to take the train if I don't have to. So Uber and walking is.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about New York that I think a lot of people who don't know New York is it's such a great city to walk.
Yeah.
And like today, just, my appointments around the city, I probably got a couple good, you can't tell by looking at me, a couple good miles in.
Yeah.
Just walking.
Very cool. And this isn't a New York-centric question, but based on our topic of conversation today, what's your favorite app on your phone?
Okay, Larry, you go first. I got to think about that one. Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's a good question. My favorite app on my phone.
Oh, my God.
I mean, I'm in Uber and walking in the city so much. I mean, Spotify's probably my favorite.
I would agree with you. There.
Spotify listening to Warner Music is my
Yes.
absolute favorite. That's my default.
Yeah, I'm actually into a lot of podcasts right now. So a lot of history podcasts on
Very
Spotify.
cool.
Oh, cool.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. We really
Thank you, Ellie.
appreciate
This
your
was
time
great.
and
Thank you.
conversation. Everybody, hope to see you at CRETech on November
13th and 14th at the Javits Center. And again, I just thank you so much, Allie
Absolutely.
and Larry, for all the support. It's so important to our ecosystem to bring this conversation into CRETech events. So we will have a panel devoted to what the tenants. We need a new term for you, by the way, right?
do.
Like occupiers. Like, what is
Yeah.
an occupier? It sounds so unhuman.
Yeah, it is.
And what is a tenant? It sounds
It's
so
the most
transactional.
human.
What should we call it?
I think that's
folks.
Okay, that'll be the
That's the next podcast.
the next podcast. And then we'll trademark it, and I can
That's it.
finally retire.
There we
All
go.
right.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you,
thanks,
Allie.
guys.
Thanks, Allie.
Larry.